By the final year of the Great War, 1918, the nature of conflict had drastically shifted. Yet elements of older military traditions persisted, adapted to new, terrifying realities. German cavalry units, for instance, continued to operate. Even when patrolling behind the main lines of engagement, troopers carried equipment reflecting both past doctrine and present dangers. Among their equipment was the steel lance, a weapon with deep roots in cavalry history. German lances were fabricated as hollow tubes of rolled steel. Reaching a length of 3.2 meters, a lance typically consisted of 3 sections fitted securely together. It weighed 1.6 kilograms and possessed excellent balance when held at the leather-wrapped grip situated midway down its shaft. Prior to the war's outbreak in 1914, military theorists across Europe had debated the merits of lances versus sabers. Determining the most effective arme blanche, or edged weapon, for mounted troops was a significant point of discussion. As events unfolded, however, neither weapon proved truly decisive against the lethality of modern firearms like machine guns and rapid-firing rifles. The initial clashes in Belgium and France during 1914 starkly demonstrated the vulnerability of traditional cavalry charges. Military doctrine had envisioned a specific role for cavalry in the industrial age of warfare. Its speed was deemed crucial for exploiting breakthroughs in enemy lines. Cavalry was intended to harass retreating forces, turning an orderly withdrawal into a chaotic rout. The goal was to prevent the enemy from establishing new defensive positions further back. Consequently, the ideal cavalry action was not a charge into concentrated firepower. It was envisioned as an attack against already disorganized soldiers falling back from a breached front line, aiming to shatter their remaining discipline. Throughout the war, commanders on the Western Front maintained large cavalry formations in reserve. During major offensives, these units stood ready, awaiting the hoped-for rupture in the enemy's defenses. The expectation was that cavalry could then surge through any gap, transforming a small tier into a wide breach. However, the dominant offensive strategy on the Western Front from 1914 through early 1917 consistently undermined this potential. Prolonged artillery bombardments, often lasting a week or more, eliminated the element of surprise. These barrages gave the defending side ample time to construct secondary and tertiary lines of trenches. Reserves could be moved up to occupy these prepared positions. Subsequently, instead of encountering disorganized retreating men, advancing troops, including any committed cavalry, often faced fresh belts of barbed wire, newly dug trenches, and well-positioned machine guns. Cavalry found itself confronting the very fortified lines it was meant to prevent the enemy from forming. Therefore, on the heavily fortified Western Front, the traditional shock role of cavalry proved largely unworkable for much of the war. During this period, the threat of chemical warfare also became pervasive. Gas attacks could occur unpredictably, making protective equipment essential even away from the immediate front lines. German cavalrymen on patrol in 1918, therefore, often carried gas masks as standard issue alongside their lances. Survival depended on readiness for both conventional and chemical threats. In contrast, the war against Russia on the Eastern Front offered different conditions. The fighting there remained more fluid, characterized by larger maneuvers and less static trench warfare. On the Eastern Front, mounted cavalry retained a greater degree of relevance. Lances saw continued, albeit limited, use by German, Austrian, and Russian cavalry units in that theater. German Lancer units found more opportunities for employment in the East, where vast distances and less developed trench systems allowed for more traditional cavalry actions, like reconnaissance and screening, far more often than was possible in the West. By 1918, while the lance remained part of the German cavalryman's equipment, its practical application, especially on the Western Front, was severely constrained by the realities of industrialized warfare, even as the lingering threat of gas necessitated modern protective measures. So in 1918, German cavalry troopers patrolled areas behind the lines, often equipped with both the traditional lance and the modern gas mask. Their presence signaled a readiness for different kinds of threats. Carrying the lance was a continuation of regulations and perhaps unit identity, even as its battlefield relevance diminished sharply in the West. The gas mask, however, was a vital piece of survival gear. During this period, the threat of gas shells landing far behind the immediate front was constant. Patrols moving through woods or valleys or stationed near supply depots were vulnerable. Thus, the image of a trooper with a lance slung across his back and a gas mask canister bumping at his side became a reality of the war's later stages. It was a strange blend of military past and industrial present. These patrols performed necessary functions, maintaining security in rear areas, guarding prisoners, carrying messages, and sometimes undertaking limited reconnaissance where terrain allowed. The horse still offered mobility over difficult ground where vehicles struggled. In the year 1918, the German army launched major offensives in the spring, attempting to break the stalemate before American forces arrived in overwhelming numbers. These attacks initially achieved significant gains. For brief moments, gaps did appear in Allied lines, creating conditions that seemed, theoretically, suited for cavalry exploitation. The old doctrine flickered back to life in planning rooms. As events unfolded, however, logistical challenges, rapid Allied responses, and the sheer exhaustion of the attacking German infantry prevented cavalry from being used in the decisive breakthrough role envisioned. The window of opportunity, if it ever truly opened, closed quickly. Subsequently, cavalry units largely reverted to their supporting roles. The troopers on patrol continued their duties, lance often remaining a symbol, while the gas mask stayed ever ready for the chemical dangers that permeated the war zone. The lance, a weapon designed for shock and momentum against formations of men, found little purchase against barbed wire, machine guns, and trenches. Its continued presence alongside the gas mask underscored the difficult transition military forces underwent during the Great War. Throughout 1918, the German war machine faced increasing strain. Resources, including fodder for horses and replacements for men and mounts, grew scarce. Maintaining large cavalry formations became logistically challenging. Units often operated below full strength. As the final months of the war unfolded, the nature of cavalry duties adapted further. Dismounted action became more common, with troopers fighting essentially as infantry when required. In such situations, the lance was entirely impractical. Carbines and grenades were the necessary tools for trench clearing or defensive fighting on foot. Yet when mounted on patrol in less active sectors, the lance might still be carried according to regulation or unit tradition. Its presence persisted even as its utility waned. One might consider the mindset of a trooper carrying such equipment. The lance represented a fading era of warfare, while the gas mask signified the pervasive, invisible dangers of the current conflict. Patrolling required constant vigilance. The sudden hiss of an incoming gas shell, the telltale scent drifting on the breeze, these demanded immediate donning of the mask. Life involved navigating a landscape scarred by years of war, alert to both enemy patrols and chemical agents. The horse provided mobility, but also made the trooper a larger target. Subsequently, as the Allied counteroffensives gained momentum in the summer and autumn of 1918, German forces were pushed back relentlessly. The fluidity needed for cavalry action rarely materialized on the German side. The war concluded in November 1918. For the German cavalry units, like much of the Imperial Army, the armistice meant demobilization. The era of the lance as a standard weapon of European warfare effectively ended. The gas mask, conversely, foreshadowed the enduring threat of chemical weapons in future conflicts. The troopers who patrolled with both items in 1918 embodied a unique moment of transition, caught between the legacy of Napoleonic charges and the grim realities of 20th-century industrial war. After the armistice, the return home for these German soldiers involved laying down arms, including the now largely ceremonial lances. The gas masks, too, were collected, symbols of a shared ordeal. The experiences of these cavalrymen contributed to the complex memory of the Great War in Germany. Stories likely circulated of patrols through devastated landscapes, the incongruous equipment a stark reminder of the conflict's nature. During this period of demobilization, the practical lessons learned on the battlefield began to shape future military thinking across Europe. The limited role of traditional cavalry against modern firepower was undeniable. Subsequently, most major armies formally retired the lance as a standard cavalry weapon in the years following the war. Its time had passed. The cavalry arm itself underwent significant transformation, increasingly mechanized or evolving into reconnaissance units equipped with lighter automatic weapons and armored vehicles. The horse soldier's role shifted dramatically. Yet the specific combination encountered in 1918, the steel lance designed for a mounted charge, carried alongside a filter mask designed to protect against poison gas, remains a poignant historical footnote. It speaks volumes about a moment when military technology and doctrine were in profound flux, caught between centuries of tradition and the brutal innovations of modern industrial warfare.